Welcome to a new episode in our series Astrology in the 21st Century. And we have a very special guest from Canada, Edmonton, Alberta, Mel Priestley. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And we will use the computer to get some information available. Okay, Mel has a homepage where she wrote something about herself. Why don't you read us what you have posted on your homepage?
Sure. So, my name is Mel Priestley, and I'm an astrologer and professional writer based in Edmonton, Alberta. I've been studying astrology since I was a teenager, and I started formal study of it in 2020 after the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which was right on top of my midheaven. I completed the Fundamentals of Natal Astrology certificate at Kepler-College in 2021, and I currently serve on the committee of the Edmonton Astrological Society. I'm also co-lead of the Canadian satellite of the Organization for Professional Astrology, or OPA. I started my writing career, professional writing, over 15 years ago with a weekly wine column for C Magazine, which was a local and now defunct alt weekly paper in Edmonton. I moved to View Weekly, which was Edmonton's other alt weekly paper, also now defunct, in 2010. I freelanced for View for many years and I wrote hundreds of stories about wine, food, theater, and local news. I was also an editor for View in the news and food and drink section between 2014 and 2016. And since 2016, I've written for many other publications on a variety of topics. You can view those on my publications page on my website. Yeah, and I do astrology consultations. You can also book those through my website as well.
Okay, and I think I have to. Yes, my camera was off. Okay, now I'm visible. Very good. So, to get into your wine expertise, what was the best European wine you ever talked about? Do you remember that?
I don't have any one single one because I have tried quite a few that were very good. There were some old Bordeaux from the 80s that the owner of the wine shop I used to work for had in his cellar, and so I've tried some of those. Those are probably up there with some of the best ones. Like 1982 Bordeaux is very special to be able to try those.
Okay, before we go back to your homepage, we start with your biography, and we talked about a little bit beforehand. Before you met astrology, you met Wicca. Could you tell us about that? You were born
Mhm.
1984, I believe.
Yeah, I was born in 1984. So when I was a teenager, it was in the sort of mid to late 90s, which was right when there was sort of a revival of Wicca. And so
Okay.
I was right in the age range, I guess, for a target audience
Okay.
for that
You,
stuff.
you were
So
you were born in Canada, I suppose?
yeah, yeah, right here in Edmonton. Yeah.
Okay. And you have been there all the time.
Yeah, yeah, born and raised. Yeah, never
So
moved away.
what happened with your teenage years and Vika?
Yeah, so I mean, I was always interested in magic. I probably started even when I was a little
No,
kid, maybe.
not so fast, not so fast.
Okay.
You were interested in magic.
Mhm.
That could mean Agrippa von Nettesheim, or that could mean Picatrix, or that could mean something else. What sort of magic was the first magic you met?
Yeah, it would have been nothing like the Picatrix. It would have been more like fairy tales and fantasy novels, right? So sort of the magic from I guess TV and books and things like that. But then
Okay.
I as a teenager discovered Wicca, and there were some movies about it at
No,
the
no, no,
time, and then I
not so fast. The other videos, it's quite okay for the viewers to go to the other videos. In this video, we go very slowly.
oh, okay.
Um, uh, when you were a teenager, and you got into Wicca. Wicca is a tradition in England. It would be gardener. In America, it would be somebody else who created the Wicca in the 50s. What sort of Wicca via books did you meet first?
Yeah, it was again, so it would have been the books that were popular in the 90s. So it wasn't the original ones. I didn't discover those until later. I'm trying to think of some examples. There were some books by like Silver Ravenwolf and so a lot of the Llewellyn books that were published under Llewellyn. So I
Okay.
found those through the local library. And so those were the ones that I
And
found interesting.
how old were you then?
Probably I started when I was 12, 13, somewhere in there reading those, and I read them all through when I was a teenager. Yeah, so
So how many years
maybe
did you read? 12 years old till you were 16 or something?
Yeah, probably about then. And I always dabbled. Like I never practiced it in a group setting. It was always on my own. None of my friends were interested in that, so I didn't really we didn't do anything with that. But
So basically,
um,
basically to interrupt you, basically the central feature of a Wicca practice to be part of a coven, you weren't
mhm.
able to participate in those years.
No, no, not when I was a teenager.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess I was too shy and I just didn't find anyone locally who
okay.
was
Okay,
doing that.
so we have a lot of books about Wicca, and in those days when you did the Wicca, many Wiccan people do more than just Wicca. They do some sort of esoteric stuff. They do tarot cards or other methods of divination. Did you do something like that in those days?
Yeah, I didn't get my first deck of tarot cards until I was in my early 20s.
Oh, okay, that was
So it
late.
was it was it was later for those for sure.
Yeah. And when you
Um,
were reading these Wicca books, did you come about the traditions of England with Aleister Crowley and these magicians?
Not Crowley so much. So I definitely read some of the stuff that like Gardner put out originally and the
Okay.
Farrars.
So there you
So
met
I
the Gardner tradition. Okay.
Yeah, so I did discover that later on.
Okay.
But again, I was mostly just playing around with simple like candle magic spells and things like that on my own. So
Okay.
nothing, no group ritual setting at that point.
Okay. So we have a lot of book information, and you are
Mhm.
16 now. In those years, you did go to high school in Edmonton.
Yep.
How did the high school friends react to your interests? Did they
I kept it
react?
pretty I kept it pretty quiet. It
Okay.
wasn't something that I shared even with my best friend. She wasn't super interested in it. And, it
Oh,
didn't really come up a lot. In grade 12, I remember. So when I was about 17, I did have a friend who lived in a house that I swear it was haunted. That was pretty spooky, and there was some really bad energy there. And I was sleeping over one night and we heard lots of noises in the basement, which she heard all the time. And so later on, a few months later, I did a cleansing of her house. Although at that point, I really didn't know what I was doing. So all I did was bring over some cheap incense and some little crystals I had, and I tried to do a smudging of her basement. I don't really think it was very effective, but I tried. So that was maybe one of the first times I did that. One of the only times probably I did that with like someone else, with a friend. Yeah.
and you did that because of your book information. You didn't have somebody
Mm-mm.
who taught you that.
No, no, I just learned that from books and came
And
to do that.
then high school ends, and you have your high school diploma, I suppose.
Yep, yep.
What did you do then?
I took a year off because I wasn't really sure what to do, and then I ended up going to university again here in Edmonton, so to the University of Alberta, and I got an English degree, English literature degree, and
Bachelor of Arts.
Bachelor of Arts. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And then during university, I was working at a wine store, which is how I got into wine. And afterwards, for about a year, I worked in the wine store until I moved into the finance industry, where I still am for a day job. Yeah.
And there our paths sort of meet because I've been in Edmonton with Treasury branches of Alberta in the Edmonton head office. Does that still exist in Alberta, Treasury
The Alberta
branches?
Treasury branch? Yeah, yeah, that's still here. Is it so it was also finance, I guess, right? Like you were
Well,
working.
it was a banking system.
Okay,
It
yeah.
is
Mhm.
like saving banks in my country, more or less.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. How long were you in Edmonton?
3 months only. It was
Okay.
a student exchange when I was studying
Mhm.
here for law in Tübingen, and there was a program for people who were interested to do an exchange with Canada, and I was lucky to get a place, and
Yeah.
Edmonton was the place I chose. So your finance industry. What was your job you got there? Was it in analytics, or did you do trading, or did you be on a counter
No,
to give the people money?
yeah, no, it's a client management role. So it's working with group like pension plans. So it's more on the like administrative and governance type of support. Yeah.
Governance type of support. Is that you are an employee of the government of Alberta?
No, no. So governance, like so helping people manage their group retirement plans. So the companies that have pensions for their employees. So I'm working with them.
And you are still working in that capacity today?
Yeah, that's my day job.
That's
Yes.
your bread and butter job.
Exactly. I
Uh,
have a Taurus rising, so I like to things to be very stable and
yes.
secure. So I haven't ever gone full time with freelancing writing. I was writing this whole time and then, practicing astrology, but I never wanted to make that a full-time career.
So when you were in the finance industry, when did that start? When did you get your degree? How old were you then?
I got my degree in 2007, and then I started in the finance in 2008.
And at that time, was that the time when you tried to find a coven? Because in another interview with you, you talked about trying to go into a group of Wicca. Was that
I
after
did,
the?
yeah. No, that was much later. I actually only did that very briefly in 2016. It was when I got involved with there as a local group.
Uh,
And it was really only for like that, like a short amount of time, less than a year.
and
Out of
it wasn't as nice as you expected. You
no,
indicated.
it wasn't what I wanted it to be, so I moved along pretty quickly.
Was it a coven with 13 people?
No. It was a loose collection of people. I did a couple group rituals with them, but there was a lot of power politics at play, and it turns out there was a lot of drama, and I just came in new, just thinking, yeah, this will be great, and then I discovered all this other background and bad blood, and it was like a witch war, and I just didn't want any part of that, so I didn't stick around very long. They were much more interested in they wanted to have a really like a public sort of church, I guess, and then there was power plays over who was going to control that. And anyway, I just wanted to do private rituals, which is what I participated in a couple times. But yeah, so that was kind of what happened there.
What was your impression of this group you were part of? Was there real magic available, or were you the only one who had a real approach to magic, or all the other people were just sort of ignorant?
So a lot of them were, so the two people who were sort of in charge, in the couple rituals I only did with one of them anyway, we were able to raise some, I guess, energy or power, for lack of a better word. What we did with that remains to be seen. I'm not really sure it had much effect, but
Are you familiar with the term egregor? Do you know what that
yes,
is?
yes.
Did you ever build up your own group egregor in that Vika experience?
So there certainly was one over that group, but I don't think it was a particularly healthy one.
Oh, okay.
And so this was also part of the problem. And I do wonder if one of the guys in that, like the high priest, if he actually tried to use some magic on me, because he was very interested in having me come in and be part of them. And yeah, so that was a little
Did he want you to become the high priestess because of the connotation that implies?
no, I don't. Well, maybe I don't know. It didn't go that
Okay.
far nearly. So, and I didn't do any nude rituals either. That was not something that I was interested in it. So, but yeah, like, he was someone who has actually been named in Canada as like a predator in that community. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, so it wasn't. So again, all of this was happening, and it just wasn't a good situation
Okay.
in my mind.
Did
Most
it
of the
did,
people, yeah, sorry.
did it change your relationship to magic as such?
It closed the door on Wicca. So, I discovered it as a teenager and I always thought I wanted a coven and I always thought I wanted to do that. And so I even, I was in my early 30s in 2016. And so I knew that it was probably, this was something that I wasn't going to get what I wanted out of it, but I felt like I just needed to try and I did, and it didn't go well. And so now I feel like I'm completely done with that. Right. So,
Okay. And but that doesn't mean that you lost your spiritual interest because
no,
in your homepage you say it's a spiritual astrological practice.
yes.
So if Wicca is done away with, what about your readings of books about magic in the time after that? What did you do there?
Mm-hmm. Well, so the Wicca I always mention because every, general book about Wicca that were published in the 90s under Llewellyn. They always had a chapter on astrology, right? And it was
Yes.
always kind of tacked on at the end, and a very, very basic, simple astrology, right? But that always intrigued me. And so I always had that interest in astrology kind of on the side. And as a child, I was always interested in the night sky and in astronomy and identifying all the stars and the constellations. So bringing those two together just felt very natural to me. And I do have to credit the Wicca books for at least introducing me to the basics of astrology. And then by the time 2016 rolled around, I was doing tarot on my own and had sort of some loose magical practices. And then it was actually transitioning from the Wicca group. I discovered the Quarea. Are you familiar with
The,
that?
the what? The what?
Quarea.
No.
Okay. So Quarea is a magical course, basically, a magical system of teaching. And it was done by Josephine McCarthy. So if you look up Quarea, you'll find it.
How do you
And
how do you how do you spell that?
Quarea, Quareia.
Okay.
And so it's like a magical teaching system, basically. So she goes module by module and it teaches you the basics, and starting with meditation, starting with the very basics of like I guess like a ritual work, the basics of cleansing, magical, protection, and all of that stuff. So I did just the very start of the Quarea course in 2016 and 17, and that actually I felt was like where I really got a better foundation for practicing magic, real magic, so to speak, not Wicca. Not to say you can't do real magic in Wicca, but it's pretty watered down. So so I did again just all on my own. I mean, I was part of, like, they had just like a social media group briefly that I was a part of, but I didn't do that for very long because I got pregnant in 2018. And so then I kind of put most of my magical practices away. But during that time, I was listening to a lot of astrology podcasts and doing more and more reading. And so it was around that same time when I was really starting to get serious about
So
astrology.
you were married in 2016, right?
No, we got married in 2007.
Oh, you got married in 2007, right
Mm-hmm.
after your bachelor.
Yeah, yeah. It was in my last year of my degree. Yeah.
And you were 22 then, right?
Yep.
Oh, right. I got that wrong. So you met your husband in university?
Through friends at university. He wasn't going to university, but yeah, I was through someone there.
Are you allowed to tell us what he's doing by profession?
Sure, he's a children's entertainer.
A children's entertainer.
Yes, so he worked in early childhood education for many years. His parents owned a daycare, so he worked at the daycare, and then they sold the daycare last year, and actually it was 2 years ago, it's 2022, and he went out on his own, and so he goes around to daycares and preschool centers, and he does art and he does music with the kids there. So he kind of takes what he had worked on for years under at the daycare with his parents, and then just kind of does it on his own.
So basically, you have the very stable job,
Yeah.
and he has his job, get generating his own income.
Mm-hmm.
And you were married since 2007, and the first child came in 2018, right?
18, yes.
Okay. And then you became a mother, and that's quite challenging having this job
Mm-hmm.
you have. Did you get some leave for the mother time for the first part?
Yes, yeah, but I didn't. 4 months I took off, so not a
Oh,
lot.
only for a month. Okay, so basically we are now in the area where astrology comes a little bit more closer to you.
Hmm.
And then you mentioned in one of the videos that on the Saturn Pluto conjunction on the 12th of January in 2020,
Yeah.
it came sort of over you. Is that correct to say that?
Yeah, it was very again, there wasn't, I don't remember a single day, but it was like I woke up at some point in that one of those weeks in that early part of 2020, right before the pandemic, and just thought I have to be an astrologer. Like, it just was like, okay, this is what I have to do now.
Now, coming to your worldview, you name your astrology practice spiritual. That means you have a spiritual worldview, Could you elaborate on your what you believe?
Yeah, so I am an animist, is generally how I describe myself. So, an animist in the sense of I believe that the world is full and alive with all different kinds of persons, spiritual persons. Some are human, many of them are not human. And so, yeah, it's generally I believe in the personhood of non-human entities and how they're all interacting with us at all times. Whether we know it or not. So basically, I live in a live universe. So then that extends to the planets as well.
Uh, there's a lot of possibilities to integrate what you just said in a philosophical system. Would you call yourself a Platonist or a Neoplatonist?
I haven't used those words, no. But certainly there'd probably be a lot of similarities, I would think.
In your worldview, is there a hierarchy of angels like in Dionysius Areopagita? We have these angel, archangel, archai
Mhm.
up to the highest levels. Do you have something like that?
Yeah, so I haven't done a lot of work with angels on purpose as well. Like, so I certainly think that there are beings out there that we could call them angelic beings. In terms of a hierarchy, like I don't think that it's all in like a pyramid and I think that there's lots of different levels all over, but I do think that I guess for lack of a better word, there are classes of beings. Some of them may be angelic, some of them may be demonic, some of them may be other that we don't even have words for that are like I guess more powerful or at least more powerful on human lives. But I also think that generally that there's spirits out there who are doing things that we don't even like we're just not even involved in, right? And they have their own things going on and yeah. So yes, I guess kind of. But I haven't done it's not a huge part of my practice, I guess I will say. It's
Okay.
yeah.
Uh, Getting to the astrology part, there are planets in astrology and there are signs in astrology. Do you attribute spiritual beings to both the planets and the signs, or how do you see the astrological stage? Who is active as a spirit or as a spiritual entity or as an
Yeah.
archetype? Some people call these entities, these spiritual entities, archetypes. What's your approach? Is are you working with the term archetypes preferably?
No, not archetypes. The planets are beings to me. So they are actual, I guess you want to call them intelligences or beings or spirits or what have you. I haven't actually arrived at what they are, because I don't know. I think they're kind of beyond us a little bit. But I certainly think that they have a spirit and they are, yeah. Um, yeah, I guess I'll just call them spirits for now, for lack of a better word. The signs I don't actually see as spirits, but they do feel like a place to me. So they
Okay,
do an archetype, I guess maybe makes more no archetype. I don't like that for signs as much. The signs more feel like like an actual place, like I
okay,
guess yeah.
okay. Um, 2018 and then 2020, then this it feels like an angel whispers in your ears, you have to become an astrologer, something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay,
I mean, I noticed the conjunction and I thought, well, okay, that conjunction is right there on my
okay,
midheaven. So
okay.
that's the astrology of it. But
Wanting to become an astrologer is one thing. To decide how to do that is another one. What was your process of thinking, okay, I want to become an astrologer. How do I do that? What was
mhm.
your way of thinking then?
Yeah, so I reached out to another Alberta-based astrologer actually, and she gave me my first professional reading. So she's a professional astrologer. And she has
Stop,
also
stop, stop, stop.
yeah.
Not so fast. She is a professional astrologer. The profession of astrology nowadays is unbelievable complex. There are
Mhm.
so many different sorts of astrology, from the ignorant idiots to the very high class like Robert Hans. Um, what sort of astrologer did you meet when you got your first reading?
Yeah, so she I would say that she's quite good.
What is she? Psychological astrologer?
No, she leans more traditional.
No, well,
But
not so,
she,
not so fast. When you say she leans more traditional, traditional is an abstract term. Some
mhm,
people say as traditional astrology is Hellenistic astrology. Some people say
mhm,
traditional astrology is Arabic astrology of Baghdad of the 9th century. Abu Mashar comes to mind. Some people say traditional astrology is Renaissance, Bonatti astrology. Some people
mhm.
say traditional astrology is William Lilly. Now, it could be that the concrete person you visited combines all those traditions, or she is one of those four, or she combines two of the four aspects.
Yeah.
What's your impression? What is she?
So it would be more towards Hellenistic, but certainly thinking about her, like what I've heard her say and doing her talks and stuff, she combines modern and some of the traditional stuff. So it's kind of
Yeah,
pulling
wait a minute.
from some
No,
of
wait a
it.
minute. Modern.
Hmm.
What do you mean by
Yeah.
modern?
Well, modern, so I mean that when she was studying, I think she first learned under that group of people in like sort of the 60s, 70s, and 80s,
Okay.
so I call that modern astrology.
Do,
Yeah,
do,
so it's the people who,
do you see those people as in the tradition of Den Radja, like psychological?
a little bit, but like in people who came after, a lot of psychological overtones for sure, but
Okay.
she's not a psychological astrologer though.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is in contrast to German relations, in Germany, the psychological astrology since the 1980s was the main dominant thing, and we had a couple of people like Thomas Ring and others who propagated that. But you seem to indicating that the concrete person you were visiting for your first reading had the capacity to interpret the chart with psychological approaches, but she had also the toolkit of older methods than the 20th century. Is that about right?
Yes, that sounds about right.
So,
It's
okay,
very eclectic, I guess. It's hard to pin people down, and I'm the same way where I don't think you could put me in any of those
yeah,
boxes because I'm kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
pulling
yeah,
from different areas, right?
yeah. Did she use the outer planets?
Yes.
She did. Did she have a 1.5 hour session with you, or how long did it
Yeah,
go?
it was about that long, yeah.
How did you feel after the session was over?
I felt pretty good. And it was, she didn't give me any major insights into my chart. I would say that I didn't necessarily already have. Because by this point I had been doing quite a lot of serious study on my own. But she did point out a few things that were interesting. But what she was really more of a great resource for, because she teaches. I asked her questions just through email, about like where should I get? I wanted to do some sort of a certificate or some formal study. Where should I go? What are the advantages and disadvantages? So she was really helpful for that. Like she gave me sort of the insider view because, as you mentioned a little while ago, when I decided I want to be an astrologer and I wanted to get some sort of a professional certificate in that because I didn't feel comfortable. Like I just wanted, I really have always enjoyed education and I like sort of more formal education. So I knew I needed to do that, but I had no idea where to go because there's
Yeah.
a million people out there. They all offer their own teaching. There's like different institutions that offer it, and I had no idea where to start. So she helped kind of point me, and that's where I landed at Kepler, just because Kepler was and is, I guess, still one of the most recognized institutions for teaching astrology in North America. So I decided to go through them.
You would find quite a number of people who would disagree with you.
I know. And having gone through Kepler, I would say that it was okay, but it wasn't I was a little disappointed with it actually. But it
Okay,
served its purpose for me.
we come to Kepler we come to Kepler later.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your advisory professional. When she gave you advice, did she steer you to Kepler right away, or did she did she talk about Lee Lehman? Did she talk about the School of Traditional Astrology in England? Did she talk about Chris Brennan's course, because that was available in those days? In
Mhm.
2020, you have lots of in 2020 you had already the Book of Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan. Did she talk about that? Did she did she sort of steer you into what she was doing herself, combine things like psychological with some toolkits of tradition? Or what was how wide was the information you got before she talked with you what you should choose because of a wide variety of information? Was it a large buffet she presented to you and then told you about the different dishes that were on the table, which schools are there, who is a good teacher? Joseph Crane comes to mind. He teaches courses. Then Glenn Perry teaches courses. So there's a lot of information in 2020 available. Who you could have gone? You could have gone to England to Lampeter University and do a Master of Astrology with Nick Campion. Uh, so, how was the concrete situation? You asked her what is available. How much information did she really give you?
So I had done a lot of reading on my own. At this point, I was very familiar with Chris Brennan. I listened to the astrology podcast all the time, and I did know about his course. But I wanted like I guess, a live teacher. In his course, I believe it's mostly self study, and I think he
Yeah,
is available sort of later on if you need
yeah.
questions or whatever. Yeah. So I was looking for more of a traditional sort of like meet once a week and go to class type of thing. And yeah, so she pointed out the advantages and disadvantages, and it was mainly around the different certificates, like the one that ESAR and NCGR offers. Um,
I was wondering,
and she,
that would be my next question. ESA has a
yeah,
course, NCGR has a
mm-hmm,
course. I don't
yeah,
know whether AFAN has a course as well.
yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, so she is aligned with OPA and with Kepler. She's now actually president of Kepler.
Oh,
So
okay.
certainly she was biased, or she wasn't president of Kepler at the time, but I was already kind of leaning to Kepler anyway as just a starting point.
What did you know?
So
What did you know about Kepler when you heard the term Kepler-College in that?
right, like I mean, I knew that it had once been an actual physical college and that they had been trying to get accredited for many years.
They
And
were accredited. They were accredited for 10 years.
oh, were they okay?
Yeah, the Kepler-College for our viewers is in Seattle, in Washington State, and from 2000 to 2010, they had from the government accredited program, not for the long run, but for the next foreseeable future. They were allowed to teach bachelor, master, and even PhDs, I believe. And Lee Lehman was the academic dean. For people who
Mhm.
want for people who want to know more about that episode from 2000 to 2010, I have a video with Lee Lehman about that time. So you came there 2020. Did the people around you, the students around you, and you yourself knew about that past of Kepler College?
I think most of us did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some of them anyway. I didn't really get to know too many of my fellow students though.
And you chose to do a specific certificate. Now I take the computer
The
again.
fundamentals of natal astrology, yeah.
Yes, which is let me see that. Okay, Edmonton, we come back to that later. Uh, I thought I had something about Kepler College here. Yes, it's here. The fundamentals, natal fundamentals certificate.
Yeah.
Now, what was your thought process when you, I suppose, let's get rid of the computer. When you were researching what Kepler was offering, they have quite a variety of courses,
Yeah.
and you chose this course. Has three modules: 101, 102,
Mhm.
and 103.
Yep.
What was your thought process? I don't want to go for the full thing right away. Let's try it out first. Was that something like of your thinking?
Yeah, so I guess maybe I was a little arrogant because I thought I knew lots already from my self-study, and I thought I just need to get like a piece of paper, official piece of paper that says I can do this. Now, there's a lot of problems with that, and I actually um like I have two different opinions, I guess, on that. Because there's a lot of people in astrology who don't really have like I don't think they've gone out and done like a formal like certificate, but they're amazing astrologers and they know tons. But then there's also lots who maybe do have a certificate and they don't know that much, or they or there are lots of people who don't know anything, but they say like that they do. Anyway, so I know there's a push in some astrology circles to try to people to get more accredited and to people get more like formal education. Again, just who I am as a person, I value education and I've done a lot of continuing learning for my other lives and stuff. So I always wanted to I just felt like if I was going to charge money from people to do readings, I should have some sort of, I guess, cred to back that up. And I also was aware that I did have gaps in my own knowledge and that I wanted to take sort of like from the basics, like, all right, let's do the building blocks. Now with the Kepler, so and the Kepler fit that because I was focusing on natal astrology at the time. I liked that Kepler also offers like a diploma. So if I wanted to take way more courses through them, I could build towards like a diploma type of thing instead of just a certificate. So that was appealing, and it just seemed like it was easy, for me on like a personal level because the classes are all through Zoom, and there was no way I could go somewhere. This was also in 2020, so it's a pandemic, so I couldn't travel anyway. But yeah, so I just thought that that was a fairly good fit with me. Um, I did actually end up challenging the first course in that certificate program because I figured like when I was looking at it that I would know enough to pass it, and I did. So I wrote the sort of challenge test for it and passed it. And
Oh,
so
you,
I
oh,
only I
you no, not so fast. For the viewers, that's new information. I read on the homepage of Kepler-College and in some of their videos that they have the opportunity, if somebody comes with some knowledge, they have a special
yeah,
test for those people
yeah,
to evaluate their knowledge. And you
that's
call
right.
that challenge test. When did that happen? When was it a written exam?
Yeah, it was a written exam. It was the end of 2020, so I passed. It was the first. It was the equivalency to pass the first the 101
The
exam.
101. What
Yeah.
was the content of 101 in your exam?
So it was very basic, right? It was answering question. I'm trying to think of what the actual questions were. Of course, now I can't remember, but it was write a description of Pisces, or like what this planet in Pisces means, and then like there was a sample chart that you had to sort of analyze, and very basic questions like that.
Was the questionnaire in the way you look at this special chart, which is part of your exam, but we don't want you to synthesize the chart. We just want to pick several questions. What does this planet in Pisces mean? What does this planet in Aries mean? And what does this aspect from planet A to planet B mean?
Yeah,
Or did you have to write a whole delineation of the chart in the end?
now I'm trying to remember if I wrote a delineation for that or for a later one. I definitely did that for later courses. There was a multiple choice section for that one, and then there was also a few like shorter written answers. So I don't think there wasn't a big written
Yeah, okay.
section, but they were like
Okay.
like paragraphs. Yeah,
And that was in the end of 2020.
yeah.
When did you contact them? Because
So
your whispering of the angel was in January of 2020.
yeah, so it was 2020 then I spent was like finding out where to go and continuing and like what I wanted to do and doing some serious self-study. So once it was probably sort of halfway through 2020 when I decided I picked Kepler. And I, decided to do the challenge test. And so I spent a couple months just doing some really like more serious studying every day on my own.
Okay,
And
so
then
not
did
so
that.
fast. That's very important. You did a serious studies on your own. That is the situation I'm in right now because I
Mhm.
have a bookshelf of books and have to decide
Yeah.
which to read first.
Yeah.
How did you find about what books you should have in your possession? Did you buy them or did you lend them?
Yeah, so I bought them, and I remember feeling frustrated about that because I was kind of blindly grabbing at the beginning. Like I'd buy a book and then I didn't really like that, and I buy another, and so I did spend some money that if in hindsight, I wouldn't have bought certain books, and I still haven't read them, but whatever, that's what happens. But when I picked Kepler, that actually helped because I just bought the
No, no,
books that were on.
we are not in Kepler yet. We are
Well,
in
no,
the
but that's how I picked the books because When I decided that I was going to challenge that 101 course, I just
But
bought
that,
all
but
the
that
books on
that
the
that
reading
that was at
list.
the end of 2020.
Right, but I bought the books on the reading list for 101 first, and I
Well,
read through
now
all of
that's
those.
a little scramble. Let's start from the beginning. In the January of 2020, the angel whispers to you, become an astrologer. Next step, you do your first reading with this Edmonton astrologer, female, and she gives you information of your chart, and then you start talking with her. What can I do? She directs you into Kepler. When was that? When did the
This
name
is
Kepler first came on the table?
Oh, I was aware of Kepler from before. I think because of listening to astrology podcast Chris Brennan,
Ah,
because I knew he had gone to it. So
yes,
I was
yes, I know. So then you go on to the homepage of Kepler-College, and there is a reading list
yes,
of the
essentially.
first course.
Hmm.
Did you buy them all?
Yep,
Did you read them all?
yep.
What book didn't convince you?
Didn't convince me.
Yeah.
There was I can't remember now. I could find it in a second actually because I'm now curious. It was someone by it was a modern astrologer. Um, of course, now I'm not going to be able to find it.
Oh, it's no problem. Was it only one book you were dissatisfied and all the others were okay?
No, there was a few that I bought, and it wasn't necessarily all through Kepler. There were some that I just kind of found on my own. I
Yes,
don't even
okay.
remember
Okay.
how, and bought it.
But
And yeah.
let's take the Kepler approach. When you have the reading list of Kepler, do you have the impression that Kepler has a good reading list for the 101?
Um, yeah, I know they're trying to cover their bases. The books that I really appreciated from them was they have a couple from Charles Obert, and I really enjoyed
Yes,
his style, and I like that his more traditional, obviously, approach. And so
right.
I yeah,
That's
so
important.
that I thought was great.
That's important. You are mentioning Charles Obert. I did an interview with him about Plato. Charles Obert is nowadays, or let's say before recently, he was a traditional astrologer, published a lot of books on traditional astrology, and
Hmm.
Kepler was recommending Charles Obert.
Yes. Yeah, for their natal, and maybe not for 101, but definitely for 102, I bought it.
Okay, so let's go back to 101. We come back to Obert in 102. In 101, did you have the impression that there was a percentage of traditional content already there, or was that more, let's keep it off the students that there is traditional astrology, let's teach them psychological astrology?
So I remember when I was in those classes, or well, was sorry, not classes. When I was looking through that, when I took 102 and 3, which was in 2021, um, the teachers were very upfront about the fact that they were in transition, so they were wanting to do much more of a traditional focus. And so when I started it like 2020, 2021, I think they were going through that. So like they had just decided that they were going to use whole sign houses
No,
for
I
these
should I should
classes.
I should have asked all your teachers
Yeah,
how they became a traditional. So because I have a series in my channel,
yeah.
my older channel, which was called "How I Became a Traditional Astrologer." The video with Joseph Crane and
Yeah.
Charles Obert was about that. So basically, what you're indicating is that the teachers of Kepler-College, when you were there, at least in 2021, were people who came from the psychological
Yeah,
domain and were in
mostly.
a
Yeah.
transitionary position that they realized that's not enough. I should go more into tradition. How was your impression when you did the 101 training and challenge? Was that also there?
I didn't see it as much, but it was like so just coming from where I was at, listening to like Chris Brennan was a big influence on me in his astrology
Yeah.
podcast, and so I was already leaning towards more traditional approaches. It was actually I think it was in 2020 when I had my house system reckoning, and I was using Placidus previously because it was default, and I hadn't really gone through that exercise and realizing, oh, there's different house systems, which am I going to use? And so I made that decision to switch to whole sign houses just on my own in 2020. So I was already kind of on that path, and it seems like Kepler was also realizing that they needed to move in that direction just because of, I guess, where the world was going in the astrology world. And it just,
And
well, and also I think it works better, quite frankly. So,
that's very. I was talking to a friend of mine in Tübingen this morning. We were discussing the problem how important the movement of astrologers who are doing traditional astrology like you, how large that movement is. And he said in Germany there's nothing like that. We don't have a movement traditional
oh,
astrology. There are two people,
interesting.
basta. There's two or three people in Germany. That's it. We don't have traditional astrologers in Germany. He said. I'm not sure whether he's right, but that was his
Yeah.
position. And I said to him,
Okay.
I don't think that's the case with the Anglo-Saxon sphere. I think in Australia, in Canada, in America, the number of people who practice traditional astrology is much larger than you could imagine. He said, "No, you're
Mhm.
wrong." People like I quote him. No, it's not my opinion. I quote Chris Brennan is brainwashing a few people, and they crying. They are shouting loud. They are shouting loud, and everybody thinks because there's so much noise, that's the main movement. That's the mainstream. In reality, he says, Chris Brennan and people like him are a very small minority. What's your opinion on that position?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not just Chris Brennan. I mean, it's Project Hindsight. I'm sure you're familiar with,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
which he was a part of, and Robert Hand and them,
yeah,
right? Doing all those translations. I mean,
yeah.
it wasn't even possible in the English world, I think, unless you could speak, ancient Greek and other languages to even have that knowledge. So that's why I think that has become so popular in the English sphere because they did all those translations to English of these ancient texts. So now we have these primary sources that we can pull from. Like, I can read Manilius or Firmicus or whatever. And that's amazing, right? Like 20 years ago, I couldn't have done that even really.
And
So I think that's
to make a comment on that, um, when I was talking to my friend this morning, I said Project Hindsight. It's very important, but if there would not have been Benjamin Dykes and James Holden, that wouldn't have been that much. So we both agree that there's a lot of work being done in translating, even in
yeah.
academia. We have a well-known professor in Germany who has a 1,500 pages Habilitationsschrift, which is above the PhD in your country. In Germany, you have to write a Habilitationsschrift to become a professor, which is not the case in your country. He wrote about Hadriana Genitura, a horoscope of the antique times. So the academic people are in translating. We have Wolfgang Hübner. We have David Just in München. So there's a lot of university business done. And there's a lot of translating being done by Benjamin Dykes. Question to you, is my impression correct? Besides Benjamin Dykes, outside of academia, not so much.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a good enough sense. Like I'm in my little corner of the world. I can tell you that I'm a member of my local group, the Edmonton Astrological
Yes.
Society. All of the people in that group, so they're like, I would call them modern astrologers. They learned under a woman who she's passed now, but she learned the psychological type of astrology,
Mhm.
and she kind of taught a lot of that. So like they all use Placidus. They make fun of me for using whole sign houses. They do like a teeny bit of some traditional techniques, but really not much. They don't really pay attention. They like a little bit, maybe they'll look at dignity, but barely. So we kind of, it's friendly, but we kind of tease each other all the time.
You are the fringe freak traditional astrology in Edmonton.
Well, I'm sure there's others like me, and I have, when we did an event last year, there were some other, and they were younger actually too. They were younger than me even, who I think they are practicing more traditional. One of them mentioned that she's studying with Adam Ellenbass of Nightlight
Yes,
Astrology. Yeah,
yes,
so
yes.
so she
He
was
has a
doing his
course.
course.
You could have
Yeah,
chosen his course as well instead of Kepler.
yeah.
Yes,
And I did. I actually haven't listened to him in a while, but I did listen to a lot of Adam as well,
yes.
back in the day. Yeah, and yeah, the other one he mentioned, Austin Coppock. I love Austin, and so
Austin
so there
Coppock
so
is from
it's
Australia, right?
no, no, he's American.
Oh, he's American. Austin
Yeah,
Coppock is American. Okay, okay. Didn't know that.
yeah.
Okay, so basically, going to your personal experience, which is what this video is about. Um, did you attend astrological conferences? You started with Kepler-College at the end of 2020, and COVID was in full blowing up. So basically,
Yeah.
there were no in-person conferences in 2021, I believe. Did you attend a real conference with people since then?
I have never attended an in-person astrology conference actually.
Okay.
So maybe I would have a different impression if I had attended that. I've again talking to the locals who, the ladies who do go to conferences regularly. I do think that the traditional approach is maybe more, but it's really shifting. So I think if you learned astrology sort of prior to the 1990s, you probably are still practicing more of the modern. You may be integrating a little bit of the traditional, but I think it's this new generation, right? So people like, me and younger, so the 20s and 30-year-olds who are practicing now, I think are much more likely to be using some of this
So
traditional
you
stuff.
disagree with my friend in Tübingen?
I think so. And I think
Yeah.
that if talk to some of the younger people out there, and maybe it's because of the influence of people like Chris Brennan and Adam Ellenbass and all that, but it's certainly in the English world, they are very popular and influential. Yeah.
I said to him, in 20 years, when I'm 110 and you are 100, we talk about this again. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it seems to me that you are right and he is wrong. I think there is a movement there that in 20 years, the number of astrologers who know what a whole sign house is and how to apply it is growing very dramatically. Okay, now we go back to Kepler-College. You passed your exam. Do they give grades? Did you summa cum laude or something?
No, I think it's pass fail. I
It's
don't
pass,
remember.
pass, fail. Okay.
So
Now,
yeah.
102. What did you do in 102? You had teachers now. How does
Yeah.
this work, this Kepler-College? It's a long distance course.
Yes, it's all online.
Do,
Yeah.
do you get PDFs to read? Do you get videos? And do you get Zoom conferences?
Yeah. So there is a weekly class meeting, so you're expected to attend. There is homework every week, so you're expected to do some readings, and they assign them from the books as well. There can be other handouts like PDFs that they share as well.
What does that mean?
Um,
Do you send your homework to them?
yeah, you have to file your homework by a certain date, and they do
Okay.
review them, and they give you mark on that or feedback, I guess. And then there was also a component where you had to post on, like, interact with the students on the forums, right? So helping each other, asking questions and things like that. So yeah.
So what were the subjects? What did you learn in
So
102?
yeah, so in the first one, like it did started with like the philosophies a little bit, talking about, some of the philosophical backgrounds for astrology very briefly. And then
Did they talk about Proclus and Plotin or Plato?
no,
No.
I'm not really familiar with that. Plato very briefly. But it was more about, yeah, it was just kind of reading, and they're trying to, they're trying to cram all of the history of astrology into like one course, so, or one section even.
But what
So they
does
wanted to cover.
what does that mean? What is about what time amount are we talking here when you talk
This was
about
like a week. So it was like in the first week, it was like, okay, let's talk about fate versus free will. That was the big thing, right? What do you think about that?
what do you
There
think
was a
about
bit of.
let me I have a series running free will in astrology. I had people like Joseph Crane and Richard Harness on that. It's on my other channel, Astro Talk. Um, I will integrate you now in that series because of our talk today, just for
Sure.
what we are talking right now for the next couple of minutes.
Yeah.
What is your personal view on the problem free will in astrology? In one of your videos, you were indicating that you lean towards Stoa, but then you don't really lean towards Stoa because your magical approach of mediating the deterministic approaches of the planets. But then on the other hand, there is something with the planets which is forcing and something which is not so much forcing. In one of my talks with Dr. Gustav Adolf in Hanover, we came to the conclusion there is the stars in certain areas of the individual life where they force you without any compromise. Then there's a portion of the life where they lean and you can follow or not. And then there's a portion of free will. What is your
I,
philosophy?
I would say that's still generally how I feel as well. When I started off, I was much more. almost all free will, and I didn't want to believe that there was some invisible forces or beings that could control me, and that had directed a plan for my life. Now that I've practiced more astrology, maybe it is the influence of the all these traditional texts and things, but I do think that I'm not a full stoic, but I think that there's a lot more to fate than we care to admit, perhaps, and that
Did,
certain
did, did,
things
did,
are
did the 102 talk about the difference of providence and fate?
very briefly.
Oh, okay. So first week, philosophy of astrology.
Yeah,
What else was the subject of 102?
yeah, then it was, talking about house systems, because of course, you have to talk. And that's when I found out that Kepler, in their examples, because the teacher, for the weekly lesson, they would have charts, right? And they were in the process of updating that to be whole sign houses, but a lot of their examples were still in Placidus. So that's where we were talking about that transition as well. And then things like the lunar nodes, the classic to modern transition was like a whole section that we did, talking about, and then it was aspect configurations, right? So the different types of aspects between the planets. We did briefly on like fixed stars and the dwarf planets, but like very, very, very briefly. Yeah, so it was mainly focusing on interpretation. Like it was because again, it was natal astrology, so the goal was to get you to a level where you could comfortably or more comfortably look at a chart and interpret it for someone.
If you would be from the government and you would have to evaluate the quality of the course 102, what would be your verdict?
I think like they did a decent job with it. It's hard, like, I mean, I haven't taken hardly any other formal courses from people, so I'm not sure what the material is like, but Um, I thought they did okay. I guess I thought it would be maybe more rigorous, but for my purposes, it was fine. And it did help me realize that I didn't know I wasn't as comfortable interpreting a chart as I thought I was, in terms of sitting down with someone and saying, okay, here, let's look at your chart. What does it mean? Right. So
Okay,
it was useful for that.
in 2021, 102, you wrote an exam, I suppose.
Yeah, for both of them. I did both of them in 2021.
So now we are in 103. What was the subject there?
Yeah, that one was again more advanced and that was better. So I liked that. Like it was talking about dignities and annual perfections and some other things that came from traditional astrology. Like there was the nautical paradigm. I think that was it Robert Hand or one of the other, I can't remember now. But so things like that, aversion, and then focusing on like uh we did derivative houses. So again, we're focusing on practical
But
experiences
that
actually.
sounds very much like traditional cool kit.
Yes, that one was
We are
much more
now we
traditional.
are now light years away from psychological astrology.
Yeah, there was in 103 in particular, there was like pretty much no psychological, like maybe a bit, but I don't really remember any
Would it
specifically.
would it be fair or unfair to call Kepler-College a school for traditional astrology on the examination level of
Um,
103?
I think they were certainly moving in that direction, and I'd have to look at what their updates have done because they've done a lot of that, and now
Yeah,
that the new president's
yeah.
come in. But that was what I was told, by the teachers, is they were moving in that direction. They
Why
wanted
did
to be.
why did a Canadian astrologer from Edmonton become president of Kepler-College?
Well, she's not from Edmonton, she's from Alberta, but close enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's taught for them for a long time, and she just got involved with them and did the work. From my little experience, in I guess volunteer positions and working in the astrological community, to me it actually seems like there's relatively few people who are willing to do that work. People maybe want to be an astrologer, they want to practice, but they don't want to actually lead an organization. That's it's a lot of work. And yeah, and a lot of people, they may think they want to do that, and then when they actually have to put in the time, they're maybe they just don't want to, right?
Yeah, Dr. Niehenke was president of the German Association for Astrologers from 81 to 91. He said in the videos, I did 22 hours video with Peter Niehenke about his time, and one part of it was about his presidency. He said we're talking about 50% of your time for the job.
I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Yeah.
Okay. You passed 102 and 103. No grades, just pass and fail. You passed all. Basically, you passed all three: 101, 102, and 103. What was your
Mhm.
feeling when you had the certificate of 103? I'm ready now to do consulting against money, or did you say, oh, that's not enough, I can't start right away? What was your
Yeah,
feeling?
so I was in a like an online just a private sort of chat community and talked to people who were also interested in astrology and yeah, I was thinking, okay, maybe I can do consultations. And so I remember having my first, it wasn't even an official consultation, but someone asked a question and I had a set of private messages with her. And she's asking very personal questions, about her mother's health and things like that. And that made me realize, oh, actually, hold on a second, who am I to like offer advice? So that was part of why I did the Kepler in the first place. But then I thought I should take some sort of consulting skills training, because when you sit there in front of someone and even through a screen doing their natal chart, you're doing astrology, but a lot, it's very similar to counseling. And I think this is why there's been so much crossover between psychology and astrology. It goes hand in hand. It makes sense to me. But I'm not a professional counselor or psychologist, so I thought, I better get some experience just working with people on that level to be comfortable with, if someone wants to bring me very personal things, that I can actually respond, empathetically and professionally and whatnot. So I contacted or I got in touch with OPA, so the Organization for Professional Astrology, because they do consulting skills training. And I did just a section of that. So they want you to do lots more. It's a whole thing. I took their consulting skills training. Again, it was all online because it was during COVID. So they normally would do it in person, but that wasn't available at that time. So
How did that work? Did you have a personal
mhm.
mentor, sort of supervisor?
There was two leaders of that, and then there was maybe, was there 10 people or 12, like, so it was a fairly small group of people, and the two leads. And then we spent, was it 6 days of like full days or half day? Anyway, it was a bit intensive, right? So it was like 3 or 4 hours a day for several days, that
And
we were practicing.
what happened there? Did they simulate a counseling situation between the two students and they were supervising, or what did they do?
Different exercises like that. A lot of it was there, they would start the day and they would do like a sort of presentation on like principles, and well, ethics was part of it, and posing questions like, yeah, if someone asked this, what would you say, and sort of just best practice type things. And then we did break out and do some I guess role playing, work and practice like that to read our fellow students charts, and just focus like very basic readings. And it was more focusing on practicing skills like active listening and things like that, right? Just to try to build up the actual consulting part.
Did they have a specific okay, in psychology is even worse than in astrology. In psychology, there's about 350 and more directions in which you could practice.
Yeah.
Did they have a specific psychology like Rogers or Maslow or transpersonal psychology as the background of
No,
what they were doing?
no, it was much more, I'm not sure. I don't think I'm familiar enough with psychology to say. It was much more focusing on just basic techniques that you would use to, I guess, be a good listener and
And
yeah.
in that week when you were doing that, did it happen that you consulted with a student, you were the astrologer, and they were listening in, and then they were talking to both of you? What happened there? Did that happen?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How often did that happen? Once or?
Oh no, several times. Yeah.
So
Different ones.
basically, you have a training of 1 week.
It's a bit longer than that, but it was broken up into over a period of time.
What was your impression after this training?
So I was,
Do I now know what
yeah,
I'm doing, or was that still a little bit
yeah.
uh, not the case?
So it gave me the confidence to be like, okay, I can do this. I don't want to say anything bad of that, especially I'm involved with Open now. I lead their Canadian satellite, but I did feel like that consulting skills training was well, they want you to take it several times to get like certified in it. And I did feel like once I had done it once, I don't know what value I would get over doing it multiple times, other than to have a piece of paper that I could say I'm now certified in this, right? So, and I did disagree with some of their approaches on some of the things. Again, this maybe the people who were leading it were coming from much more of a, like, I would say, modern astrology background. And so there were certain things that, like, they would, I think they, I'm trying to remember if she said this, yeah, like never ever predict someone's death, like that's right out.
That's
And now I don't do that. I
that's
don't do that, but there's a lot of length of life techniques in traditional astrology that one day I'm going to dive into. I don't know if I'll offer that to clients because obviously you're walking into a minefield if you predict someone's going to
yes,
die.
yes. It's
But
it's a minefield in German-speaking countries
yeah,
too. Yeah, the official organizations are very touchy about this
yes,
sort
they're
of
very, and anything to
prediction.
do with, again, this is just because of where we are in the world. Anything to do with sex and gender and all of that, they're wanting to be very, very careful. Again, it's kind of funny, like maybe because I'm younger and also because I have a corporate day job, so I've done lots of this training anyway. Like I don't need to be told don't be racist or don't be sexist. Like it's kind of like duh. Like, but I guess there are some people in the astrology world and the rest of the world who do need to
Yes,
like
yes, yes.
told these
Okay,
things. Like so
okay. You are a member of OPA, I assume.
yes, yes, I am.
How much do you pay per year?
Oh, now I don't remember. They always offer discounts and I sign up. I want to say 80 to
Okay,
$100,
that's good
somewhere
enough.
in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
100 Canadian dollars or US
Yes.
dollars?
Yeah, it's Canadian. They give the discount to the Canadians actually because our dollar is not very great. So I tend to sign up when they offer a discount because it's, yeah,
So it's
kind of.
around about $100 membership fee. After this training, what else do you do in OPA
So because I'm a,
besides paying the fee?
yeah, so the fee gets you, and now I feel like I shouldn't have even mentioned the fee because I'm actually not sure.
We leave
Um,
that open. People can look it up on the OPA.
yeah, they
OPA.
can look it
Oh,
up.
yeah.
I feel like it's around $100, but I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, okay, but what
Um,
do you do with OPA? What's your
yeah,
why are you let's ask this way. Why
yeah,
on
why am I a
earth
member?
is a younger person willing to be a member of an association? The structure of these associations comes from the Earth period, and the Earth period is no longer around. We are now in the air period, and
Hmm.
membership of this sort of structures is a sort of it's gone. It's no longer valid. Why are you still member of an organization like that?
Well, I do think there's still validity to it, or else I wouldn't be here. But I did just kind of fall into it. I mean, then there's so many organizations, right? And it's so easy to sign up to all of them, and then you think, what am I doing? So, like, I'm also a member of ESAR, and I have to say, I do basically nothing with ESAR. So I'm questioning whether I'm going to continue that
So you're just
membership as
supporting them
well.
with money, not using any of their services.
Essentially, yeah. Well, and I know they're redoing their website. I haven't gone back and to look that they have resources, but I honestly just haven't had time to check it out yet. With OPA, so that you do get to, they have their talks every year that they do. So monthly talks, and you get to go, well, free, part of your membership. They have a magazine that they put out, and it's extended for the members. So I glanced through that. Again, there's so much content all the time. I do have a list of recordings of past speakers.
What's your impression about OPA? Is it 80% contemporary psychology, which the term I used from Elena Avila, instead of modern astrology? Because modern astrology is basically 1700. I say contemporary astrology for the psychological approach. Would you
Yeah.
say OPA is 80% psychology astrology?
They try to cover all their bases. So it's hard to say. If you're talking about the people that they have do their talks every year, I do notice that they do try to cover like a lot of different areas. Like they'll have someone do Draconic or Uranian. They'll usually have someone do a Vedic, and then they'll have some traditional. So I feel like they try to mix it up as much as they can. Um,
Doesn't that annoy you? You have to listen to things you don't want to hear.
No, but I see that's the thing is I have actually, I wouldn't call myself a purely traditional astrologer. I came out really strong in that field. I actually have been hybridizing a lot. So I have started looking at charts again in like Placidus and different house systems just to see. It's also very interesting to see especially at my latitude. So I'm at 53 degrees north. In the spring, I actually had two clients who were both born north of the Arctic Circle in Canada. So, well, Placidus is impossible to use on their chart, it breaks. So, like when there's only 12 degrees between the ascendant and the midheaven, what are you going to do with that, right? Like, so, but it's, I still do look at the quadrant houses and I find it useful because I do think there's an orb to house cusps, but that's a
Okay.
different subject to talk about.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you have the Journal of Oprah and you pay money to ESA without having anything from
Yeah.
ESA. What,
Well,
what
maybe
are
one day I'll use
do
that.
you read the Mountain Astrologer regularly?
Yes, actually, I'm working on a story for them right now.
How do you like their approach? Because I don't want to have the Mountain Astrologer anywhere near me anymore because they're so far away. There's so much content not traditional. Uh,
Yeah.
and the problem is, as far as I can tell, the journals, Deb Holding had a journal in traditional astrology, and Helena Avila and Sue Ward and Peter Stockinger had and Luis Rivera had a traditional astrology journal in the beginning of the 2000s. Is my impression correct in your Anglo-Saxon sphere? Because we talked about Germany is desert
Mhm.
in traditional astrology. Is there a specific journal of about traditional astrology, or should you found one?
I haven't found one. I don't mind the Mountain Astrologer. I like them.
Okay,
And
okay,
I actually like getting a sampling of different stuff, even if I'm not really
oh,
interested in it.
okay.
I don't want to just close myself off and only focus on traditional. Like I'll read anything and I may read it and go, I'm not going to do anything with that, but that's okay.
But we do remember that you are not a full-time professional astrologer. You are a
Yep.
financial professional.
Yep.
And if you take 24 hours of your day and you have children, how many children do you have?
Just one child. Yeah.
One child, you have a husband, there's breakfast time, there's dinner time, there's
Hmm.
friends. Do you have personal friends or are you just a recluse?
A few, but mostly online. I don't see a lot of people in person anymore.
Ah, okay. Okay. How does the workday look like? We are talking now, it's about 10 o'clock to 10:30 in your country, in Edmonton right
Hmm.
now. How does your everyday day look like? Why can you talk to me right now and not be in the office?
Because I took this week off work.
Ah, very good. So if you don't have holidays, how much time a day is occupied by the financial profession?
Too much and not enough astrology for sure. Yeah, I and my day job has gotten very demanding over the last year for sure, and this year looks to be the
Is it
same.
from 9 to 7 or 9 to 5?
Uh, 9 to 5. Yeah. Now I do have the option to work from home about 3 days a week, which is good.
Okay.
Um, so I can stay caught up on, home chores, right? I can do the dishes on a break or whatever, right? So it's good for that work-life balance. But yeah, astrology often doesn't and this is another reason why, I have a list of recordings from OPA and ESAR to watch, and I haven't gotten through them all because I just don't have enough time to do them all. Yeah.
So basically, when you talk about doing readings for clients, that has to fit in the hours before
Yep.
9 and after 5,
Yep.
or when you are at home and can do something in between.
Yes. So if it's a work from home day, I can fit a reading in, but I do keep my schedule pretty limited, and I don't take a lot of clients because I
Okay.
just don't have time to, right? Yeah.
Me wanting to become a client of yours, we have to talk about that separately. How that,
Yeah.
how our time zones will fit
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. That'll be the biggest challenge,
The
honestly.
biggest
Yeah.
challenge. Okay, so basically, we realize now that Mel Priestley is a very well-educated astrologer, having basically only time in her free time to do the astrology because
Hmm.
9 to 5 is a full-time job every day.
Yep.
So, okay, now let's go back to your practice. And how much time do we have left? How long can
I
you go on?
I can go on for a while yet.
Okay, very good. Now, first Robert Hand, 1986. There was a video by Chris Brennan on his podcast YouTube channel about the United Astrology Congress of 1986, which comments from Chris Brennan and other people in the chat. And Robert Hand was saying in that video, astrology is applied mysticism. What do you think about that?
yeah, I would generally agree with that. But I also, again, coming from more of a magic background, and I do some astrological magic, so that's in line with my practice. I don't know. I think there's some people who would disagree with that though, because they're coming at it from a very, I guess, a non-mystical point of view.
Okay. Next quote, this is from me. Astrology is a ritual to experience the numinosum, the unknowable archetypes, the children of Nous. This is the highest level of God spheres. An attempt to come into cautious contact with the self, which is different from the ego. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. And it's yeah, I don't even know what I can say in like a couple sentences about that. um it is in line, I would say, with my experience and my practice. I wasn't really familiar with the numinosum or the children of Nu, but yeah.
Okay. When you say you do magic in your practice, what does that look like?
So I do daily devotional work, so prayers and things to build up
Let's be
my.
concrete. In the morning, do you do a prayer to all seven planets, or do you do a
No,
prayer for the ruler
the
of the
day,
day?
the ruler of the day. Yeah.
How about the ruler of the hour?
I try to align it, but I don't always hit sunrise. So sometimes I save it until later in the day during the hour. Some
Okay,
days, though, if I just need to, if I'm busy, I'll just do it during whichever hour.
okay.
But to the planetary lord of the day, yeah.
Let's take the next text. The astrological queen as high priestess. I formulated this way because the term astrologer sounds masculine and the female astrologers are in majority nowadays. So let's take this astrological queen as high priestess as a synonym for the astrologer. Um, and the Kabbalistic cosmology. Are you in any ways connected to Kabbalah?
No, not really.
Okay. The divine oracle as mouthpiece of the divine, a direct channel to Nous is the highest level of divine people
Hmm.
in the Neoplatonic world, and the anima mundi, the mandala of the horoscope to meet Poimandres of the Red Book of Sige Jung, delineating as a sacred ritual. First question, are you familiar with the Red Book of Sige Jung?
Yes, I am.
Do you concur that the horoscope is a way to meet Poimandres?
So I'm not familiar enough to comment on that because I can't remember Poimandres, but I have
That's
done some.
the Poimandres guy in the Red Book is the one of the highest level of knowledge, of divine knowledge, who is guiding
Oh,
Sige Jung.
yeah. Certainly, I think you could do that. Yes, I mean, I've used the technique in his red book, the active imagining, and there's something to that. And I have done similar techniques to like journey to the signs, for example, using sort of Jung's active imagination technique. So yeah, I
Okay.
think it could help you
So
get there.
so the recent idea I had, I have problems with the dignities. You have
Mm.
to attribute points and
Yeah.
you have to add the points and then you get a result and I don't really know what I'm doing. Now I had this idea, if I view the horoscope as a living entity of people, basically
Hmm.
my own people, because that's my horoscope. And if I see the planets as dignitaries, not as planets, as rocks in the universe, but I create a Downton Abbey scenario. Okay, you remember Downton
Yeah.
Abbey?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when the king comes, the whole castle is in action. That because the king and the queen are coming.
Yeah.
And if I think of dignities, would you see it possible to see dignities as dignitaries, a planet? So to find out who is the king, like in Downton Abbey, in my horoscope, and who is the duke, and who is the marquess and the earl and the viscount and baron, because this would be a result of looking at the dignities. Because in the
Yeah.
end, there would be one planet with more dignities than the other, that would be a king.
Hmm.
And there would
Yep.
be a second planet, and there would be the Duke, and then there would be a third planet, and there would be the Marquess and the Earl. Would you think that's an approach you could go along with?
I don't really like that idea because you could end up in a with a horoscope with no kings or queens or anyway, everyone could just be sort of the common people. Like if you don't have any
Well, that
planets
would
that
be
are,
a republic then.
I guess so, yeah.
I
And
mean,
but that's not to say that,
that wouldn't be
yeah,
a problem because then you had,
yeah,
if you have a chart of that kind, you have to think about that chart in terms of who is
yeah.
ruling.
So I think that I don't like the hierarchy that's implied with thinking of them as dignitaries like that, with the king and the queen at the top, and then the nobility and everyone
But
underneath.
that's what you're doing when you do dignities. You look for the
Um,
ruler of the horoscope.
I see it more as well, it's true, you could look at it that way. When I total up dignities and things like that, I see it more as like, does that planet have the power to do what it wants to do? And the other thing is having a really dignified planet isn't always necessarily, it could be very challenging for you. If you have a very dignified Saturn, that could be a very restrictive force over your life because
Yeah, but
Saturn is,
it could be a king of my chart.
it could, but that
Yeah,
doesn't mean that it's going to be like good for you, I guess, in terms of
yeah,
your
okay.
experiences. It could be
Okay,
very
I was
challenging.
just curious how you see this idea of mine because
Yeah.
it helps me to understand dignity, so I will stick to it. So, next question. In Germany, we have a tradition called the Rauhnächte. This is translated rough nights, and it's from the 21st of December, or in other traditions, from the 25th of December till the 6th of
Mm-hmm.
January.
Mm-hmm.
It's the night when the veil between the material world and the spiritual world it gets thinner,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a wild chasing bunch of people coming from the behind the veil and chasing through the villages. And if the people were not doing right, they get punished. Do you have in Canada anything like that from your indigenous
No,
people?
possibly, but I'm not familiar with anything
Nothing
like
like that
that.
in Canada. Okay,
No.
we discussed free will in astrology or the term. There is the German phrase from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, geprägte Form, die Leben sich entwickelt, shaped form that evolves alive. I suppose you don't have a problem with that.
Nope.
There is something in there and then it devolves. Now, we talked about the fundamentals of natal astrology certificate. Now, in one of your videos, you were talking about the problem. It's an illusion to think that astrologers could consult without a bias when consulting with a client. How large a problem is that in your opinion? In the video, it was not pretty clear how large you see that problem.
Was this the one where we were talking about the astrologers kind of competing with one another in the
Yes, yes.
scarcity mindset? Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it was a scarcity video. Yeah, I think so.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's certainly that's present. That's accurate. I actually talked just very briefly with the local group about that, and they said that yeah, like if you get out into the astrology community, at conferences, you meet other astrologers. A lot of them do have that very competitive mindset, jealousy, like that type of thing is very common. Yeah.
Is my impression correct that in America, at least, I don't know about much about Canada. Those 3 months in Edmonton didn't really give me an impression about the country, what's going on there, and it was
Mm-hmm.
1974.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch videos nowadays and some conference videos and stuff like that, is there a left-leaning tendency under astrologers politically?
Oh, very left leaning, like very, very leftist. Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Um, I think it's because astrology was, weird and new agey, and I think that it was practiced on the fringe, and so I think that several decades ago, the left was maybe more open to that. So there was and also the types of people who were drawn to astrology may have had left leaning sort of politics in general, just because of there's more women in it, and so they were finding maybe women's like I guess power or liberation in that, right? And it was like a profession that more women did. But yeah, there and just or people who were more spiritual and again, this is very stereotypical, but I think that right-leaning people tended to be more, certainly in North America, like more Christian and more like I don't want to say fundamental Christian, but there's some of that, right? I mean, it's more a problem in the States, but there are certain areas where you probably wouldn't want to be public as an astrologer, or you might risk like having some really nasty sort of blowback from the local Christian communities. Like they'd call you like a devil worshiper or whatever, right? So you still, there's still some of that. So I think that naturally, if you're interested in astrology, magic, any of these types of things, the left was more welcome to it. And I think that's possibly because the left also has become really not very religious at all, to the point where I think a lot of what I've observed anyway is leftist people rejected all, you know, religion, and they're atheists or whatnot. Now, some of them, like, not obviously not everyone, but so they're more okay with it, I guess, because of that. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, honestly, the pandemic I think really showed the left-leaning bias of astrology. Just it was certainly in North America. I'm not sure what it's like in Europe, but yeah.
How about to deal with that problem? Because if you have an astrologer with a bias politically and socially, how can you do a correct delineation work?
Yeah. So I mean, that is hopefully when you're looking at on a natal level and you're doing a reading for someone, maybe politics don't come into it. Although I will say that because of what I've written on my blog, and if you follow me and generally like what I say, you'll see that well, maybe it's my Libra moon, but I can see both sides of the picture. I don't like going to either side. I reject both sides of the political spectrum because they're, you know, I have problems in general. I call myself an anarchist. So I tended to attract clients that were okay with that, you know, and that they, you know, they were kind of maybe similar or whatever. But I just keep my mouth shut, really. If I have a client who starts saying things that are very political one way or another, okay, you can say that, and I may completely disagree with you. I'm here to help you with whatever it is that you needed help with in your natal chart, and you know, you're still a
Yeah, but
person. And
that's
yeah.
an indication that you are not in that area of problems. But there are astrologers who are not able to deal with that like you do.
Yes, and it's challenging, and that's part of the reason maybe why I'm also not super interested in going out to the conferences and things like that, because I do feel alienated when the, you know, and now I mean I'm doing this stuff with OPA, and that's more mundane astrology, so geopolitical stuff. And yeah, like I was just on a panel discussion. I presented my take, and then another astrologer, she was very, very left leaning. It was very obvious, and I find that so funny when you're making predictions about the country and politics. It's so obvious what someone, you know, what their political leanings are based on what they're saying, and I'm sure I do it too. I can't help it, but yeah, it is a little disappointing when you see someone,
How,
and we'll see this year with the American election, because the astrologers will be talking about that. It'll be very obvious who they want to win based on what they predict and what they say, I think.
um, there is a problem of how to get information.
Yeah.
Well, we had this a couple of years ago that there was a little bit of brainwashing in some media. There is still some brainwashing going on in the world, and I have to be very careful because this will be produced on YouTube, and I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
cancelled.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you manage the problem? How to get the information you want to have? Do you have? I have a sort of alternative information providers. Do you have something like that, or do you read
Yeah,
your
I
local
do.
newspaper?
I get the local news headlines and the mainstream news headlines, sure, because I want to see what they're saying. But then I also have a loose network of different podcasts and things, mainly because there is it, like in Canada especially, the newspapers, they've all kind of consolidated. They're
Okay.
almost, there's not
Are
that
you
many.
if you're talking about geopolitics, do you know the Duran, the two
No,
people, Alexander Mercury and Alexander Christophorou? You'd have never
no,
heard of them.
no.
So basically, what is your okay? This is a test. I have information you don't have from the Duran and from Larry Johnson. You don't know Larry Johnson either, I suppose.
No.
What is your impression of the Ukraine war? Who, how is the situation from your point of perspective? Is it just out of curiosity? You are in Alberta, you are in Edmonton,
Mhm.
you have a couple of information, but not all the things I have.
Yeah.
what is your impression about the situation in Ukraine? What will be what Russia will do, in your opinion? Will they sit down for the discussions, or will they see it through?
So that, oof, that's such a loaded question. So again, tapping into my Libra moon, I can see all this. So first of all, I am completely anti-war in general. So anything I say, don't take that as me supporting one side or the
No,
other, because I think
that's
this
not the
whole thing
problem.
is
It's
awful. Yeah.
basically your
Um,
evaluate on today's edition of Larry
yeah.
Johnson. He was publishing a talk the Russian president was giving to wounded soldiers in Russia, and they asked him, "What will be your position? How this should be ended?" And he had a very clear position. He basically said, "There will be no negotiations except they accept what we want." That is a very harsh position
Yeah.
of the
Okay. So
Russian
that
president.
was generally my impression of Putin, is that he wants the territory that he wants. I don't think he wants to negotiate, so that makes sense. I also know that Ukraine is very corrupt, and there's a lot of problems there. Now I know
Okay.
that's being played off politically.
Yeah.
And I know that Canada is very, very tight with Ukraine. Edmonton actually has a very high population of Ukrainian people. It's like 10% of
Okay.
our population. So the locals are very supportive of Ukraine and very
Okay.
against Russia. And I think in general in Canada, we're not a fan of Russia. So they tend to call them, well, whatever.
Do those people in Edmonton, let's keep it more personal. Do
Yeah.
those people in Edmonton realize that the expectation that Ukraine has a chance is just an illusion?
So it's funny, when this war first broke out, we had our local group, and someone presented some charts and said, the Ukrainian people won't give up, they're gonna win, blah blah blah. And I was just sitting there silently thinking, I don't know, I think Russia has the upper hand here. Now, Ukraine has had tons of money pouring in from all places of the world and stuff like that. And that's the only reason why I think the war has extended so long, is because of all of that
Yeah.
support. And I don't know at what point. I think it looks like that support's finally drying up. Like there's
Yeah.
nations can't keep
We can
giving
stop it. We can stop it here. We
all
can
this money.
talk.
Anyway, yeah,
We can talk privately about this interesting
sure,
conversation.
yeah,
Now let's go back to your astrological practice. You mentioned that you personally have Saturn Mars conjunct in Scorpio in the seventh house,
that's right.
but nevertheless, you were married since you were 22 and you are still
Yeah.
married today. Now, Saturn Mars conjunction to start with. How do you delineate this combination?
Yeah, when it means like part of me wants, well, so my Mars is obviously very dignified, right? So it's a very strong Mars.
First question.
So
First
yep,
question. Mars is the ruler of Aries and Scorpio.
yep,
Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius.
yes,
There seems to be a theoretical problem in astrology in the traditional approach. What sort of Saturn do you have? Do you have a Capricorn Saturn or do you have an Aquarius Saturn? And
Capricorn,
you have a
very
Capricorn
Capricorn.
Saturn. How do you find that out that your Saturn is Capricorn and not
Well,
Aquarius?
because of the way he's behaved.
No,
I
that's
have a
not.
mid,
I won't
yeah,
accept this sort of answer. We are on the
okay,
theoretical. We are on the theoretical side.
sure.
There is in the theory of astrology a Saturn who rules Capricorn, and there is another Saturn who rules
Mm-hmm.
Aquarius, and it's not the same Saturn.
No,
Now, if you don't know anything about the persons you are delineating, in your case, you know what you are and you know what your husband is, and
mm-hmm.
you can say, okay, this Saturn is Capricorn because he behaves like that. But
Yeah.
if you're sitting in front of a chart in preparation for a delineating session, is there a chance for you before you meet the client to delineate what sort of Saturn is in their chart? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. So the reason I'd say, so aside from my own personal experience, I have my midheaven and Jupiter in Capricorn, so that sign's already getting emphasized. And then if you look at, so the Dodecatomoria of my ascendant, it's Capricorn. And then there's some other yeah, there's some other Capricorn connections, I guess you could say, in my chart. that are not obvious potentially, but it reinforces the Saturn and the Capricorn aspect as opposed to just Saturn in general.
So basically what you're saying is if I want to know what sort of Saturn or what sort of Mars in that concrete chart is, I have to look at all the other bounds, decans, dodecahedromorphs, and
It
aspects.
helps. Yeah, it helps a lot. And then also just, yeah, doing the basic dignity for sure. But yeah, looking at the different subdivisions of the zodiac and which signs and planets are repeating in those, that's where you start to notice the patterns coming out. And it helps you realize that. So I'm a Taurus rising, but it's in the Capricorn. Um, it's in the Capricorn, I guess,
Okay.
Dodecatemoria, 12th part of that.
Okay.
So that gives me a lot more of a like Saturnian sort of undercurrent to the Taurus, right? Which is part of I think why I was drawn to like the finance industry and drawn to having a very stable, steady day job with a set income coming in, and yeah, so.
When you look at Capricorn and Aquarius as an example, and we won't do it for the rest of the astrology, you have two signs. They are both ruled by Saturn. In your opinion, what's the difference between Capricorn and Aquarius?
The difference between
In the traditional sense, not with
yeah,
the outer planets.
institutional structures and social structures. So I mean, it's the difference between Earth and air, right? So yes, thinking of Saturn in an air sign, it is interesting to go through Aquarius. And I don't subscribe to the age of Aquarius, that type of thing. It's actually still quite oppressive. It is still Saturn. Saturn having very strong opinions over how things should be and how they should be organized, and a very sort of restrictive, I guess, set of rules for how people should organize themselves in a social
Basically,
level.
what you're saying is if we look at the difference between Capricorn and Aquarius, ruler Saturn, or Taurus and or Taurus and Libra, uh, basically the ruler is much more important to find out about the differences than anything else.
Oh, yeah. Well, but the element comes into play as well. So earth versus air
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
is
okay.
a very different expression. Yeah.
Okay, the the Saturn Jupiter conjunction on the 21st of December, on the day of the ingress into
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn,
Yeah.
took place on the first degree of Aquarius on this ingress day of 2020, 21st December 2020. Ray Merriman has a video on the internet about this degree, which was loaded with this energy of this new cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think in that category that if there's a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, that specific degree will be loaded for the whole time of that cycle? Do you agree on that basically in general terms?
Um, yeah, like so he means 0 degrees of Aquarius is the
Yeah,
key point. I mean,
first degree of
yeah,
Aquarius, yeah.
I would say it would be a key point anyway, just because it's the first degree of the sign. But yes, I generally, I mean, I know what he's getting at. He's getting at the new Jupiter Saturn cycle, which is in air now for the next 200
Yes.
years, basically, right? So yes, no, I mean, I generally agree with that. Like we've certainly moved into an air cycle, like 100%. And zero Aquarius, I would think, would be a key degree anyway. But yeah, it has extra importance because of that. So
Do
anytime,
you
and I mean, this is where Pluto is now, right? So
yeah
it's or is about to go there.
do you
So
do you use this theoretical approach in your practical everyday practice? If there is a client who has an aspect or some connection to this degree, do you use that?
yeah, if it's in the chart, then I know that okay, when if you have something at 0 Aquarius, I know, well, you got Pluto coming up to there in a moment anyway. But also you had that conjunction, and I would expect something probably fairly significant to have happened
How
in their
how
lifetime.
how how, how wide is the orb of this degree for transits for
It
you?
For me, it depends on which planet we're talking about. So for the Jupiter Saturn conjunction,
No, we have let's take Pluto, which I don't take for everyday astrology, but let's
yeah,
take Pluto for discussion. If you take Pluto and it's now on the first degree, and you would have in my chart, I have Jupiter on 2.5 degrees. Would that be in the orb?
2.5 degrees of Aquarius.
Yes.
For Pluto, I use really, really narrow orbs. So, well, it depends on what I'm talking about. For natal astrology, very narrow, like 1 to 2 degrees, maybe three, but no, probably more like 1 or 2. So
Well,
I think you would,
1 or 2 would
yeah.
be sufficient. Okay, so basically you are saying in a chart like that, where I have Jupiter on 2.5 something in Aquarius, that is
Hmm.
something I should look at.
Yes. And
Okay,
I think that you maybe not notice it right away, but I think probably next year,
okay.
that may come into play more. Yeah.
Now let's do a virtual visiting of your virtual house, which is your homepage.
Yep.
We had reading you this what you are, and now we're going to the homepage. Okay, setting the stage. There you have some written information about 2024, right?
Yep.
Why don't you have a YouTube channel?
I came very close to starting one in last year in 2023, but it's a lot of work. So,
Well, I
um,
don't agree. If you
no.
have to establish a YouTube channel, takes you 15 minutes.
Well, I do, and I do have one. But I
So okay,
decided that
so you have a YouTube channel
I
established
just don't
already.
post anything. No.
You just don't put. Okay, the second thing is if you want to do work on YouTube, look at me. I interview people. I load it up, and that gives me the opportunity to say about something about the copyright for the viewers. I have the right to publish this very nice talk with Mel Priestley, uncut and unedited,
Hmm.
on video platforms and on my homepages. And Mel Priestley has the right to do with the footage whatever she likes to. She can do whatever she likes with this footage. So basically, what I'm saying is, I started with you at 17 hours German time, and we will finish in 10 minutes or so, and then
Yep.
then my Zoom program will convert the thing. I load it up on YouTube, and that's all I do, and nothing I do, nothing else. So
Hmm.
why do you think there is work involved? You could you could
Well,
you could you could do, for example, if you take this setting the stage, if you just would read what you have written in the
but
camera,
I've already written it, so I mean, I guess I could, but I
it
figure
would
if
be
I'm
it
so
would
I'm
be a
a,
diff if people would see a chart, they would see you talking, and you could even do a live chat with that. You don't want to
yeah.
do that.
But you're talking about another hour or two of work on top of all the hours I spent
Yes,
writing it.
and that's why you don't do it. Okay, and
So
that's
it's just
yeah,
time. Yeah, I
yeah,
I don't have the
yeah.
time. It's also I decided I didn't want to. I don't know. YouTube feels like it's very saturated with content. So is the internet, but I feel
It
like
is,
there's
it is, it
actually
is, it is
there's
saturated.
a lot. I feel like there's a lot less people blogging about astrology on like a I would say a more serious
Ah,
level like me.
okay,
Um, I've gotten actually, and I'm a writer, and so it's natural for me to just want to write.
yeah.
But I've gotten a lot of just random people finding my blog by Google search, right? So people
Okay.
still go to Google and find me there. So yeah.
I have to confess, I have forgotten how I found you. It must have been something with Dodekatemoria, but I have forgotten how I found you. I didn't tell you, I suppose.
If you Googled Dodecatomoria or
Yeah.
Dodecatomoria, I still don't know how to pronounce that right.
Oh, so it could
Um,
be via the Google search. Okay, okay.
it was probably Google, yeah. So that's why
Okay,
I feel like I need to keep posting on my blog.
and this is what we're talking about, your blog. This is your
Yep.
blog. And there you can find. Can you explain to me why this thing was not filmed, this discussion, and put on
It
YouTube?
was.
It
It
was?
was, but it's private for members only because it's a paid event.
Yeah, but it's over now. They could put it on
Yes.
now. Okay,
No,
not
they
my
they
not
they send the link to the people who paid, so
yeah, okay.
that's
Not
also
not
another reason to be a member.
not my problem, their problem of public relation. Okay, there's a lot there on your blog, so people
Hmm.
can spend a lot of time on your blog. Now, webinar recordings, you did some recordings which people can buy, I understand, right?
Yep. Yep. Those are some past presentations I've done for
And there's the
organizations.
published writing, and then there's a consultations. There's a quite a different number of services you offer. There's
Hmm.
some
Yep.
people who wrote what they experienced with you,
Yep. Testimonials.
and where these are frequent questions. And now I'm looking for the book a consultation. Then you click on that button, and then you have natal chart,
Hmm.
electional consultation. There's a lot of different consultations. Now, considering that you do this in your free time, and not that many clients. Is the natal chart consultation 80% of clients?
I would say over the past year, it was probably like probably over half wanted a year ahead forecast. But I've been doing this a few years now, so I've had some regulars.
Oh,
But a lot of people,
you mean solar
sorry.
revolution and perfections?
Yeah, but that's part of it. So it's
Yeah,
looking
okay.
at, and then I transits and all the rest of it
Okay.
too. Yeah.
So that gives me for a last question. When you do perfections, you perfect a sign more or less, right? And then the planet who is ruling that sign is the ruler of the year, correct?
Yep.
Let's take Aquarius and Saturn. What does a perfection ruler like Saturn mean?
Depends on where Saturn is in your chart and the aspects he's making to other planets.
So basically, without the natal chart, you shouldn't think about it at all. Right.
You're very limited. And because I wouldn't go out and say, oh, you're in a Saturn year, it's going to be bad because Saturn's bad. No, no, you could have an amazing year if Saturn is really dignified. It's in great connections with other planets. It's able to do what it wants to do. Like you could have a super good year. Similarly, people have like a Jupiter or a Venus ruled year, and it's a crappy year for them, and that's just maybe because of what they happened in their chart. Like even though it's the benefic planets, they're not always in a good spot. They can cause problems
Okay.
too. Yeah.
What methods do you use for the solar revolution, solar return, and the year ahead? You use solar returns?
I do this. Yes, so I do a solar return.
Do
Look at it
you
just in.
do you add the perfection?
Yeah, so what I do is I figure out the perfected ruler of the year, and that's mainly what I focus on in the solar return chart, is that
Okay,
what the perfected ruler is doing. And then I also do a bi-wheel and compare the solar return chart to the natal chart just to
okay.
see what's being emphasized.
Do you add the
Um,
Lord of the Orb perfection?
to the which, sorry?
The Lord of the Orb? It's from Abu
Lord of the.
Mashar. The Lord of the Orb is the Lord of the planetary hour in your chart. And
Oh, okay. No, I don't use that technique.
you don't use that perfection. What do you use transits for
Yep. Transits, and I briefly look at solar arcs, just to see if there's any, big hits or anything.
primary directions?
I don't use primary directions yet. That's the next level.
Secondary progressions?
Yeah, I do use those for
You do
sure. Yeah.
this. That's a lot of load. I looked at your prices. They are more or less cheaper than in Germany.
Hmm.
Normally, if you prepare for a session for a solar return situation,
Hmm.
one says 4 to 5 hours preparatory work. Is that for you true as well?
No, I'm probably around 2 hours or so, I would think. Yeah.
But basically, we are talking that you don't take enough money for what you're doing because then the session comes additional to it. Normally, a psychologist charges between 120 and 250 euros. If I take your Canadian dollar, that would be 200 between 250 and 400 Canadian dollars for a session. You don't charge that much.
Nope.
What's the reason why? You could charge more because you don't have so many clients you could advise at all. Are you still building up your practice?
Yeah, I am. I'm building on my practice. It's also a reflection that I have only been practicing professionally for a couple years.
Okay.
Um, so eventually I will raise my rates, but I
De
don't feel like.
Depending on the market situation, how many demands are there, you
Yeah.
will reduce it when nobody comes, and you will put it higher when you have too
Well,
much
yeah,
demand.
I'm leaving it as it is for now. Again, I feel like I get an appropriate amount of clients. And to be honest, if I had a client, even one a week, that would be too much for me. I probably only do one or two a month.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, because with my day job, right? Like if I had 4 or 5, if I had 8 clients a month, I would be swamped. Like I would have no time to do anything. So
And
yeah,
the two of us will discuss our special
we'll discuss that.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, did I miss to ask you something about yourself and your astrological practice, which you would like to discuss?
I don't think so. No, it was pretty thorough.
Okay. So, to the viewers, thank you for stopping by, and to Mel Priestley from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, thank you for doing this, and I will stop the recording.
And thank you.